Hello, and welcome to my demonstration video on painting with the watercolor batik technique. The painting titled Tyger. In this video, we'll show you the developmental stages of creating this painting and then follow with the actual batik process I use. This painting is done on jin washi, which is a thin Japanese paper embedded with short silvery threads. It is available at some art and craft stores and online. Before beginning the demonstration, here are a few examples of animal paintings done in watercolor batik. This painting is entitled On Guard. This painting is entitled The Palomino Paint. Here is a watercolor batik on masa paper, and it is entitled Serengeti Stripes. The first step in creating any painting involves finding an inspiration. You can safely use any of your own personal photographs or images from your imagination or views of when you've been taking a walk or a trip. Using another's photograph, either have their permission or use photographs from non-copyright photo sites such as Splash or Pixabay. Under any circumstances, please avoid copying another artist's work. The Tyger photograph I used for the painting Tyger was downloaded from Pixabay. My process involves first making a drawing. I consider this the bones of my painting. My drawing is done on a piece of 8x10 paper, and I spend a lot of time here. When I develop a drawing I think will work, I scan it into my computer, and I do this for several reasons. One, I can now print out copies of my work on cardstock so that I can use watercolor pencils to create a prototype of the proposed painting to work out any color or composition and future waxing issues. Number two, the stored image will be available for other projects. Number three, I will be able to enlarge the image as desired using my publisher program and cutting and pasting in large sections together. The next three photographs show the watercolor pencil process in action. This is a photograph of the final watercolor pencil drawing. This process has helped me, for want of a better word, bond with the subject. I've seen a couple of things I need to think about. The mouth of the tiger needs some work in regards to critical value changes to give depth and define different tissue. Also, the tongue needs to be simplified. The basic color palette looks okay. I will darken the background values in areas in which the whiskers need to be included, because I might be using white gouache for some of the whiskers rather than trying to wax in the thin lines. Enough thinking. Time to enlarge the corrected image and transfer to the jin washi paper. Here you see the image being enlarged by quartering the 8x10 scan in my computer publisher program and enlarging each quarter to give me an enlarged image approximately 19.5 inches by 15.5 inches. When the enlarged quarters are matched and taped together, this is what will actually be the final tracing I will put on the jin washi, and another critical time to evaluate any changes that need to be made. Here I've securely taped the four quarters together, and looking at the image I decided to extend the tiger's stripe pattern down the back, following the pattern already established in the photograph. I enlarged the eyes slightly, hoping for a more dramatic look, and lastly, I reduced the size of the lower jaw. It seemed to me to dominate the face a little too much. I make changes with Pro White and a small brush, but any correction fluid usually works, and I added the additional stripes with a fine black Sharpie. Now it's time to trace that image onto the jin washi. First I lay a sheet of jin washi over the corrected drawing and trace it onto the paper with an ultrafine Sharpie. Once the basic tracing is complete, I use a Dr. P.H. Martin's black, waterproof Black Star India ink to fill in the stripes. I could use watercolor, but I admit it, I'm a bit lazy and prefer the deep, rich darks that the ink provides for the tiger stripes. Another plus in using a brush to apply the ink to the stripe areas is that I can use a little dry brush technique to give a bit of fur look. I do not use the ink in other areas such as the mouth, only the stripes, and in this instance, the pupil of the eye. It's time to put the traced image, an inked image on the jinwashi to the support board, and I will be securing it with push pins. The support board itself is made from several layers of cardboard held together with tape and then covered with plastic coated freezer paper. I use clean freezer paper with every painting to avoid any transferring of color from a previous painting. I'm going to begin at first by painting the iris of the eye, a green-yellow combination of sap green and lemon yellow. I'm also using a dilute burnt umber to define an area on the chest area that will be mostly left white, but it does need a little bit of definition, not to be just solid white. The nose and tongue will be painted with alizarin crimson, toned down with a hint of viridian. The 4 teeth need a little color, so I added a bit of raw sienna and alizarin crimson near the base of each tooth. Lastly, I want to preserve that glow along the tiger's back, so I first paint in new gamboge, then blend in some quinacridone gold as I move into the tiger's body. Let all of these dry completely before I continue. Here's a close-up of the facial area. Once dry, I cover the teeth, tongue, and eye with melted wax. I apply melted wax to the highlighted back of the tiger, but not to the edge of the painted area. I want the next layer of watercolor to blend here. I have also applied areas I want to remain white using my watercolor pencil drawing as a rough guide. Since we've started with wax, let's talk about that a little bit. Always use extreme caution and very good ventilation when you're melting wax. Here you see I have a small electric skillet always filled with water, always, or use a commercial wax melter. Keep your temperature within range. I use it about 180 to 200 Fahrenheit. Never leave it unattended, ever. As far as the wax itself, this is commercial batik wax, which I use most often, but I also sometimes use paraffin wax, the same that you would use for canning, and sometimes I will mix both batik wax and paraffin wax. But again, please use caution, be safe, and enjoy the process. Using a combination of quinacridone burnt orange and quinacridone gold, I apply a slightly graded wash to the entire body of the tiger. You'll see it bleeds outside the lines. This is something to be expected with jinwashi, not to panic because I have already planned the background to cover some of that. In this image, I continue working on the body of the tiger, darkening the wash where I felt it was necessary. I went a little too dark in one area, and an interesting question came to mind. Can you lift color on jinwashi? The answer to the question is, can you lift a little color on jinwashi, is yes. You can lift or lighten the watercolor on jinwashi if you feel you've gone too dark. However, jinwashi is fragile when wet, so use care in the process. If the applied color is still wet, I use a clean paper towel or tissue and simply press the area repeatedly. It will never completely lift all the color, but it will lighten the area. If the applied paint is dry or only damp, I use a spray bottle and spray the area, let it sit for a minute or so, and then use again a plain, clean paper towel or tissue and press into the area I want lighter. Do not rub with either technique, only press down and use new paper towels or tissues as color saturates the previous towel or tissue. When I'm satisfied with the body areas that have been washed and some places a new glaze put over, and when the watercolor has completely dried, I apply a layer of melted wax to the entire painted body area, being careful not to cover the unpainted areas such as the lips and mouth with wax. Here is a detail of the head area, and I have painted the wax and the tongue and lips area with Payne's Gray, the tongue with alizarin crimson, and now I'm ready to wax over all those areas also. Now the entire body area, including the mouth, ears, and everything, have been covered with at least one layer of wax. And I've moved on to the background area. To highlight the detail on the main element, the tiger himself, I decide on a loose wet into wet background, emphasizing green foliage near the bottom, gradually integrating blue sky and sunshine as I move upwards. When the background is completely painted and completely dry, I cover the entire painting with a layer of melted wax, which I call the cracking layer. Here is a photo showing a detailed close-up of the face with that additional layer of melted wax applied. As you can see, a lot of details are not visible now. This is part of the interesting part, that when we finish this and take all the wax off, sometimes we really don't know what's going to be underneath it all. Now I've covered the entire painting with that cracking layer, and the reason I call it the cracking layer is that layer of wax will be crunched a bit so that there will be cracks developing in the wax for the wash to seep in. If it's a warm day in the studio, I like to cool this layer of wax so that it will crack more easily. And this will enable the dark watercolor wash I'll be applying in the next step to the layer below, therefore obtaining that desired batik look to the painting. To cool the cracking layer of wax, I often use frozen cryo packs and sometimes even frozen vegetable packages. When I cool, I remove any push pins and lift the painting from the support board, and some cracking will occur in this process. But you can use your hands to crack the wax in additional areas if you desire. I tend to add additional cracks to open areas such as the background in this painting, and I do try to avoid overcracking detailed areas. But let's face it, part of the mystique in batik watercolors painting is not knowing what your final result is going to look like. Here is a detail of an area of the painting with that dark watercolor wash being brushed on. I will cover the entire painting with this wash, and in this case I used indigo, and sometimes I add a little Prussian blue or deep sap to emphasize a particular color area of the painting. At this point you will not see it going into the cracks usually, and that is something why we have the next step. It's now time to cover that wash layer with a final layer of melted wax. This is important to work rather quickly, since once that dark wash layer is covered with that final layer of melted wax, the wash will continue to seep into the cracks, and if you leave it too long, you could possibly ruin the effect you wanted to achieve. And by quickly, I mean reasonably quickly, 10-15 minutes to get set up with your iron, but please don't do it overnight unless you're willing to experiment with the effect you're going to get. Here is a detail photograph of the tiger's face with that final layer of wax applied over the dark wash, and you can see at this point, if you look at the entire painting, the details are pretty much obscured, and again, not quite sure what you're going to get. But let's go ahead and move on to preparing an area to iron off the wax. Now it's time to talk about the removal of the wax. If possible, have an area already prepared, or at least the materials assembled for this area, and getting ready to iron off this wax. This can be a messy process, and I suggest the following. 1, have an area prepared. I use a work table, and I first lay down an old bath towel and then cover that with a single layer of cardboard. Number 2, I then cover that area with plastic sheeting and an additional piece of large cardboard. I also have a large trash bag nearby in which I will be placing the wax impregnated newsprint paper. The cardboard is covered then with a layer of heavy duty craft paper. I sometimes use paper bags that have been cut and opened. And I now lay out 4 sheets of newsprint. I purchase newsprint online in either sheets or rolls. Then begin heating the dry iron. Be sure it's a dry iron, not on steam with water, and heat it to cotton or linen. Finally, I lay the painting on this surface and cover it with at least 2 layers of newsprint and begin ironing over this newsprint. You will notice the wax melting and being absorbed by the newsprint paper. Change the paper often, tossing used paper into that trash bag until little melted wax is visible. Turn the painting over and proceed in the same manner with newsprint on the backside, and continue ironing both sides until no melted wax is visible. Here you can see the painting beginning to be revealed by the removal of the wax. I love this stage of the process, but I'm also a little apprehensive since I never quite know what might be revealed. So far, this is looking pretty good. Don't be concerned if initially your painting seems dull. Here on the right you can see a piece of white matboard set under the painting, and on the left simply the cardboard it was laying on. Having that white behind it really brings out the color, so do not be concerned. This is something that you will be doing, and that is putting your gin washi painting onto a matboard. Since gin washi is thin and fragile and the very waxing process looks much better on a white board to bring out those colors, I always mount my gin washi paintings on a piece of archival white matboard. I use either a spray adhesive or yes paste with a stiff brush and a brayer, and I would like to encourage you to let it dry flat for at least overnight. Do not set it at the edge, it could dry at a curve, so dry it on a flat surface. Here's the completed Tyger painting. He's been mounted on the mat with the, I used yes paste in this case. I don't have too much to touch up. I did add the whiskers with a little bit of white gouache. So I do think it's time to think about how I might want to frame this painting. I usually frame my watercolor batik paintings as I would any of my traditional watercolor paintings, matted and glazed in a metal gallery frame. But this is a personal choice, and I encourage you to present your work in any way you desire. You can wrap it around a canvas, you can present it almost as if it were fabric. Enjoy trying the process to make your work look uniquely yours. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you have been able to take away some valuable information regarding creating a watercolor batik painting. There are many techniques and ways of doing this, and you can probably develop some new unique ones to yourself. If you enjoy seeing and exploring creating fine art with batik techniques, please subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. That's Magalia Rose Studio. And if you have time, visit my website, magaliarose.com, to see some of my other artwork. Until next time, I encourage you to keep creating.